Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan Hofarth, and I'm the president of RNAO, the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the release of RNAO's Work and Wellbeing Survey results. This survey took place over January 29th to February 22nd and captured responses from more than 21,000 registered nurses, nurse practitioners, and nursing students who worked in all domains of practice across all sectors of the healthcare system, including hospitals and long-term care. I want to say thank you to everybody who took the time to participate in the survey. This is really important information for RNAO and for the health system to be able to collect. So thank you for taking the time out during a time that we know is very busy for everybody to complete this survey. The survey really does validate what myself and the board of directors and RNAO staff members have been hearing from RNs and Ps and nursing students in every corner of the province and every domain of work. It has been a really difficult, trying time for everyone, but particularly for nurses who are working directly with patients, residents, clients, and communities to try to provide them the best possible care during this very difficult and uncertain time. So thank you so much for your contributions to not just to the survey, but also to the health of all Ontarians. And thank you for being here today to hear more about the results of the survey as well as the next steps. Today, we have several members from the RNAO staff who are here presenting to us. So we have the CEO of RNAO, Dr. Doris Grinspin, Kim Jarvie, who is a health economics. He works in health economics at RNAO Home Office, and Matthew Kelway, who is the Director of Policy at RNAO. So I'll hand it over to Kim.
Thanks, Morgan. As Morgan was saying, this is a large survey. We've got about 2,102 respondents. 91% of them were RNs, and the rest was split between nurse practitioners and nursing students. Such a large sample has a pretty tight confidence interval if it's drawn on, if it's a random draw on the population. It's plus or minus 2.11% percentage points, plus or minus, and that's. That would be the envy of polling companies who are usually satisfied with a sample of 1,000. A lot of people took the trouble to respond, and they did it, in part to help out, but I think also they want to tell their story. And what we're trying to do here, as much as possible, is honor that expectation. We're obviously not going to be able to do the complexity full justice, but we're trying to capture a bit of it. And so here's the story, for me at least, in a nutshell. Almost everyone in the survey was impacted by the survey. Most were affected significantly, very significantly, but they experienced it differently. The impact, the magnitude of the impact was very different for many nurses. The support levels varied a lot, and the coping and adaptation capacity, there's quite a range. Which all the people respondents pointed to. So what I'm going to do here is look at the first the demographics, which proved to be very representative of the nursing population. Then I'm going to look at the impacts, which are large, as I said, but varying depending on the respondent. Then I'm going to look at the responses to those impacts, and finally the potential workforce losses, which was something, the magnitude came as a surprise to me, not to Doris, but it came as a surprise to me. So hats off to Doris for that. And I'm going to speak first of all in the demographics. Look at the work setting, and you'll see that all the sectors and settings are well represented, and roughly in proportion to the way that they appear in the overall nursing population. So the big area, of course, is hospitals, and then the second largest area in the sample and also in the population is long-term care. But there are also significant numbers in primary care, home care, public health, community, and academia. Next slide, please. Domain of practice, again, well represented, but again, in proportion and what you'd expect for given the way that where the domains of the nursing workforce overall. The vast majority are staff nurses. The next largest group are managers, then nurse practitioners, clinical nurse specialists / advanced practice nurses. And the next age distribution, interesting, it's very, very close to the overall age distribution in the nursing workforce. There's two bulges, one in the early mid 20s, and a second one in the late 50s. So it's basically bimodal. Don't be confused by the last bar, which rises up because it's like it's everybody over 60, so that's multiple bars. So, but it is basically bimodal. Next, the impacts. The level of stress due to the impact, not many people said it was very low or low. The vast majority, well over 90%, said it was at least moderate, and well over half said it was high or very high. So that's a significant finding. Next slide. Coping. We see there's varying responses, considerable resilience. You can see there are a lot of nurses who are coping reasonably well, notwithstanding the stress. So many are over, rate their coping at 7 or more. The biggest single group is those who are moderate coping, but significant numbers are having very serious coping problems. You'll see rating 1s and 2s. And if we dig down a little further there and see how that plays out by age group, if you look first of all at the yellow area on the upper left, you'll see the numbers are elevated for those younger nurses, the ones from 21 to 35. If you compare those numbers there with the numbers at the bottom, the numbers at the bottom are the averages. So you can see they're well above the average in low coping. And at the other end of the age group, if you look at nurses 56 and above, they score themselves very high in coping. So there's a significant gradient age-wise between when it comes to coping and adjusting. Next slide. Okay. Now, it was interesting, notwithstanding the pressures to stay on the job, a full 26% said that they had taken time off to manage stress, anxiety, or other mental health issues related to the work during the pandemic. The text responses indicated that there were others who stayed on the job in spite of the fact that they were stressed, just because they knew if they bailed, then their colleagues would be facing even higher levels of stress. So they stayed on when it really wasn't in their best interest to keep on working at the rates that they were working. Support is very, very interesting here. We've got 3 different groups or sources of support. Employers, the dark ones, and you'll see that they tend to rate lower. So the highest, or the biggest single grouping is in fair. Now, if you compare that with, and then if you compare that to government, the scoring is even worse. The biggest single grouping is poor. And if you look at the distribution for RNAO, the orange symbol, you can see that the mode, the most prominent number is 35% of good. So the distribution shifts to the right with as you move from government to employer to RNAO. So that was a kind of a positive finding to see that members were feeling supported by RNAO, but we're concerned about deficits in support, particularly from government. At least this is the perception of the rating of our members. Next slide. Now, we're concerned about what what's going to happen after the pandemic. And we find there's a limited number of respondents who are willing to work more, about 7.5%. But you can see that 40% either want to work less than they're working right now, or they want to work, they don't want to work at all. Now, it's important to note here that that if you look at the College of Nurses data, more nurses want full-time than actually have it. So what you're really seeing here, and what we see from the other data, is that the nurses who are looking to work less time are the ones who are working super long hours, way over 40 hours a week. And so the lesson here is that you're going to face a loss of people who are overworking, but that's probably timely. Next slide. How many more years do you plan to continue working? The number of retirements you can see there, you're looking at 4.5% if you add the first two immediately after the pandemic, those first two columns. You could be losing 4.5% if you add those two given rounding errors. If you add the within the first year, you're up to 9.3%. So I mean, it's a really, you're looking at a surge in retirements above normal levels. I'm going to come back to, we're going to consolidate all the losses in a bit. If we can proceed to the next one. We can see here that there are certain areas where the losses are going to be greater. Clinical nurse specialists and advanced practice nurses, the first one, the highlighted on the left, you can see 13.3% of them could retire or planning to retire by the end of the pandemic. Another 13% of executives, nursing executives, 13.8%, would retire by the end of the pandemic, and 10% of college faculty. So that's a lot of bodies lost. You can see if you compare over the other side with the 10 years that there are fewer relative to their peers that are going to last 10 years. So looking out the future, we really do have to figure out how to replace these nurses who are going to be leaving. They're very important nurses. How likely are you to leave nursing for a different profession? This is a different question. We just looked at retirements, and this is a different form of departure where you leave nursing and go on to another occupation. So the majority, 57%, say they're not at all likely. But the scary thing here is that 9.3% say very likely. And that's given that overall, between retirements and other departures, you lose 4.8% of the nursing workforce in a given year, just from departures to other professions of 9.3%. That's a huge leap. So something that you really have to watch for. Next slide. Now, if we drill down by age group, it's even sort of scary. I want to focus on that age group that's highlighted from 26 to 35. And if you go over the second last column there, the very likely leave, 13% is to leave after the pandemic for the 26 to 30s, and 13.3% to the 31 to 35. That's huge. And note that it's also a much higher departure level than overall. So it's part of a long-term pattern. Nurses in this age group are more prone to leave, and you'll see this in the next graph. But this is something that you really, really have to pay attention to. The next slide. Now, if we look at stress as a factor, there does appear to be a correlation between, look at the bottom row, very high stress. It's the people who are very likely, it's 18.7% versus an average of 9.3%. And the not likely, if you go over to the left, is only 38.7% versus 56.9%. So very high stress levels are certainly a risk factor for leaving after the pandemic. Next slide. And here I want to compare the background rate of losses with the losses that the respondents report. So if you look at those highlighted areas, again, the younger nurses, mid 20s to mid 30s, you'll see the background rate for 2020 for the College of Nurses is around 3%, 3.3 for the younger ones, 2.7. That's pretty worrisome, given that at other age groups, it's a lot. The loss rates are lower until you get up towards retirement age. But now you look at the survey, 13%, 13.3% versus 3.3%, 2.7%. That's like 4 times. So you could be facing a loss of 4 times the background rate at the end if these results held for that population. Next slide. Now, I'm just going to digress for a second here. There's also quite a bit of discrepancy by work setting. You can see, first of all, look at the good cases for risk of leaving nursing. So this is not retirement, this is leaving nursing to go to other professions. You can see with the primary care and academia, the very likely rates, that last red column is really, really low. But if you look at the lighter shaded areas, public health, look at the hospitals, you look at community care, those numbers are very, very high. They're above the average for this group. So you have to watch, not only is there an overall problem with potential losses, but they're much higher in certain sectors. Next slide. So here I put together all these losses. And if we look at the third column, the percentage losses, you're looking at 1.4% could retire now, 2.7% after the pandemic, within a year, 4.3%. So that total by itself is 8.4%. Now, if you add in the people who would move to other professions instead, you get a further 7.2%. And so if you go to the second, or the horizontal line right there, you get a total potential loss of 15.6% of the population. Now you compare that with the College of Nurses data right beside it, 4.8% is the background rate. So you've got something in the order of 3 times the potential losses overall. And I played that scenario out, and you can see that the numbers, the losses continue, although the gap isn't as bad, in part because you're sort of front loading the losses. But in these first few years, you could be facing a lot of losses unless something is done. Next slide, because that's it. Okay, over to Matt.
Thank you very much, Kim. I'm Matthew Kelly, Director of Nursing and Health Policy for RNAO, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to bring some of Kim's findings to a conclusion and provide you with some recommendations that RNAO is putting forward in response to the survey. And then I'm going to hand it over to Doris to talk about next steps. In terms of a conclusion, I'd like to repeat that all conclusions here are tentative, and all findings to date are suggestive only. But this is a story of the potential rapid depletion of the nursing workforce in Ontario in the aftermath of the pandemic. And central to that story, and of great concern to us, are the early career nurses that are reporting high levels of stress and consequent challenges with coping through the pandemic. These challenges with coping would seem to be threatening their tenure in the profession, as they are also more likely to depart the profession. While late career nurses are not reporting the same amount of stress as other nurses and are coping better, they are tending towards retirement in significant numbers after this experience. Our main conclusion here the higher rates of retirement in combination with departures from the profession of early career nurses threatens the effective functioning of Ontario's health system post-pandemic. And further, the impacts of early retirements and departures from the profession look like they won't be felt evenly across the profession. Next slide, please. There are some very broad policy implications that emerge from this survey. One of them has to do with pandemic planning. The free text responses to the survey illustrate more than any of the data that so much of the stress experienced by the respondents could have been avoided by better preparation and planning. The lack of PPE comes up frequently as a source of concern and stress. The lack of and constant change of protocols is another source. For some, it was simply the inefficient use of nursing resources that was a frustration, and this frustration remains today as so many nurses and other healthcare professionals have yet to be engaged fully in vaccination rollout. The second broad policy implication has to do with health system transformation. While the impacts of the pandemic have been universal, RNs and NPs in the hospital sector and public health have shouldered a disproportionate burden of work and stress through the pandemic. The cause is twofold: an underfunded and understaffed public health and community care system pre-pandemic, and the government's hospital-centric response to the pandemic. The post-pandemic focus of health system transformation, we believe, must turn to enhancing community care and public health resources. RNAO has spoken about this need since the release of ECHO 1.0 in 2012, ECHO 2.0 in 2014, and the recent release of ECHO 3.0 in 2020. But our focus today and the subject of our recommendations today are the following. Nurse human resource planning. Ontario entered this pandemic with the lowest RN per capita ratio in the country, and this pandemic has put significant strains on an understaffed health system. And nursing career supports. While all nurses are going through this pandemic together, the experiences and the responses by nurses at different stages in their career, in different settings, and in different domains of practice are different. We need to be attuned to these differences. Next slide, please. The recommendations, therefore, we talk firstly here about nurse retention strategies. And we start with these strategies because the response to the results of this survey must be immediate, and they must focus on retaining nurses, indicating that they'll retire in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, and they must focus on the early career nurses that are indicating that they'll leave the profession. Needless to say, the loss of early career nurses would have a profound and lasting effect on the nursing workforce in Ontario. So recommendation 1 speaks to the need for increased supports for these early career nurses in particular. One of the interesting findings that emerges from the survey is this: just as the likelihood of leaving the profession is age-related, so is the respondents' assessment of employer support. Over 35% of early career nurses considered employer support very poor or poor, while less than 10% considered the employer support very good or excellent. And the opposite is true of late career nurses. So employer support and the likelihood to leave the profession appear correlated. 25% of those who rated employer support as very poor are very likely to leave the profession, compared to only 2.5% who rated employer support as excellent. This connection between employer support, age, and the likelihood to leave the profession needs further and urgent examination. Both the data and the free text responses to the survey point in the direction of the following retention strategies: reduced workload, limiting overtime, increasing mentoring opportunities in the workplace, increased accessibility to mental health supports, and the increased availability of child care. So our RNAO plans to conduct focus groups to examine these particular retention strategies. Recommendation 2, you'll see on that page there, is increased staffing levels. What we do know from the survey is that increased staffing levels are a critical retention strategy. As mentioned earlier, Ontario came into this pandemic with the lowest RN per capita ratio in the country, and that has had an impact. There is a consistent pattern that's too marked to ignore of pandemic-related stress, challenges in coping and adjustment, inadequate support for so many nurses, and the desire for fewer hours of work, the desire to retire, and the desire to leave the profession. Increasing staff levels is a response to all of that. On the next slide here, we talk about workforce planning issues. The challenge with workforce planning recommendations is they aren't as immediate as retention strategies. They are, however, nevertheless incredibly important and urgent to get underway. You'll see our first recommendation here is increased enrollment in RN BSCN programs by 10% in each of the next 4 years. A 10% rise would translate into about 567 more admissions and would raise the workforce by about 0.5% upon graduation. And then if we do the 40% rise, we're talking about adding 2,000 grads per year to the nursing workforce, almost 2% of the nursing workforce. The fourth recommendation here is to increase nurse practitioner supply by 50% by 2030. This is a central or the central recommendation coming out of RNAO's Nurse Practitioner Task Force report, Vision for Tomorrow, which was released just weeks ago at Queen's Park Day. The last recommendation I want to talk to you about is to implement succession plans, in particular for management, senior management, and faculty positions. Quite alarmingly, and just as colleges are about to begin to offer 4-year baccalaureate programs in nursing, we find here that 50% of college faculty intend to retire within the next 2 years, and nearly 2/3 of college faculty respondents indicate an intention to retire over the next 4 years. It's a similar story with university faculty, although the numbers aren't quite as high. It's about 1/4 of respondents indicating an intention to retire over the next 4 years. High numbers of nurse managers and nurse executives are indicating an intention to retire immediately after the pandemic or within a year of the pandemic. It's not clear to us whether or not these high numbers represent postponed retirements during the pandemic or lower than normal retirement rates during the pandemic. Nevertheless, these are rates that signal immediate employer attention to succession planning. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Doris to talk to you about RNAO's next steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matt and Kim and Morgan. Before I move to talk about next step, Kim made a very interesting comment that he was very surprised, and I said, I am not surprised. While I'm not surprised, I am shocked though. I'm shocked that this has been a long-standing problem, similar to when we speak about the issues in long-term care that have been a problem vis-a-vis residents in long-term care and staffing in long-term care. The same is about the nursing profession. RNAO has been, since 2013, ringing the alarm bell that we are the lowest RN per population in this nation. We have been, since 2013, saying stop the replacement of RNs by other healthcare workers because it's a dangerous trend. We went into this pandemic short-handed to care for the people of this province. And my board, my president, my colleagues that just spoke with you, we tip our hats, first of all, to our colleagues in the front lines that did what they have done and continue to do what they have done, regardless of a province that for over a decade has cared little about its workers as it relates at least to the nursing profession. It aches me to say that because RNAO as an association has been supported by government, past and present, to deliver outstanding programs like evidence-based guidelines, outstanding programs like support for education when people want to go to a conference, etc. But when we are talking about health human resources, the number of RNs, the number of NPs, the number of faculty, the number of managers, etc., that this province needs in order to have a well-functioning health system, we have been consistently for over a decade shorthanded. So thank you to our colleagues. The situation, as you saw from Kim's descriptions and in Matt's policy piece, in long-term care, in hospitals and in public health are the most serious ones. If we don't do something now, no recruitment of new people, which we will do and we will fully participate, will help, as I said to a reporter today when they did a tee-up about this survey. Why? Because if you don't retain nurses, as soon as the new ones come, they're hearing the current ones saying, this is impossible. So of course, people will continue to leave the profession if we don't fix it at the seams, meaning in the staffing issues that the province need, in the support that nurses need to do their work, in the respect that managers, executives that are going to live in mass and faculty need to have to be able to build the profession up. This is not about nursing. This is about Ontarians. This is about what does this province need to continue to function. And as anyone else will tell you, people go to hospitals because they need nursing care. They may go to a procedure, but they stay there because they need nursing care. Otherwise, they're at home. People go to long-term care because they do not have any other option or because their condition is so difficult that at that point they need home nursing, home care, long-term care. But we need to build this profession up and we need to build it from the community in, as Matt said. We spoke about ECHO into 12 to 14 and again to 20. We need to build home care up because that's where people want to be. And as you saw, that's where nurses are more satisfied, actually, and less leaving. We need to build primary care because that's where people live. And that's where nurses actually are more satisfied because of what they're doing. And yes, we need to build hospitals, long-term care, and public health up, because if not, there will not be no care for people when they need it desperately because of their situation. And that's what you're seeing now in ICUs. This is exactly what you're seeing in ICUs. And nurses are leaving as we speak. Although Kim reported about immediately after the pandemic, let me tell you that what triggered me to say to my team, we need to check the pulse, was not only that one nurse committed suicide, was also that nurses were telling me, we can't handle it anymore. I was getting calls home of people telling me, I am leaving. So people are leaving already. And the call to the government and to employers is urgent. And I say to the government because it starts with funding. The Premier came to our Queen's Park Day in February and in front of our entire board, an assembly of leaders, and we respected it and we valued that he came. He committed to over 10,000 more RNs in the next 4 years. Well, a message for the Premier, as I said, and left several days ago and again yesterday. We don't need it 4 years from now, Premier. We need it now. We need at least 3,000 of those RNs now in the health system. Number one, for Ontarians. Number two, because if not, we will not retain the rest of the people that we have. And the system will crumble not only during the pandemic, but will crumble after. Second, before I go to next steps, I ask Ontarians to take care of themselves and stay at home, even though the Premier has not said it. If you don't stay at home, you're burdening our colleagues more and more. If you don't stay home, those ICUs cannot handle any more patients. And nurses and doctors and respiratory therapists and others are on their knees trying to take care of people. We ask Ontarians to take action on looking after themselves so they don't end up in ICUs. And we ask this province to put sick days so that they can stay at home. and not be obliged to go to work because they need to put food on the table. And we also asked the Premier to mandate public health to start to vaccinate people in places that are high risk, communities that are high risk, factories that are high risk, and people that end up in ICU that don't look like the 4 people here in this screen. They look black or they look brown, and let's be real. It first was ageism in nursing homes, and now it's racism in ICUs, not by the nurses and the doctors, but by the fact that we are not supporting these people to have a better health, and these people are younger, and nurses are breaking in their souls just to see them, let alone to take care of them. Let me tell you what are the next steps in relationship to this survey. We are actually doing 3 surveys because we are going to create a program, and that will be the foundation for the nurse wellness program. The one you saw today is a survey of RNAO members and non-members that we received over 21,000 responses in a matter of 3 weeks. That is very meaningful. Second is a survey by a colleague from Ottawa, Ivy Bourgault, and her colleague Melanie Trimbley. They're doing a survey of 11 health professions. Nursing is one of them. So we will be able to compare what we are experiencing in our profession with other 10 professions. That will give us how much is common, how much is different. The third survey we are doing with colleagues from Australia and Nursing Now with 150 countries. And RNAO is running it under the leadership of Kim Jarvie, Matt, myself, and others here in Canada. That will give us what's happening in the world. So we will be able to compare the situation of nursing in Ontario to the situation of nursing in other places of the world and to nurses in other professions. Let me tell you what's my hope and what's my fear on behalf of RNAO. My hope is that we will see that we will be better than others. My fear is that it will be like the CIHR report on long-term care, CIHI, that basically said Canada is the worst country in the world as it relates to the care of residents in nursing homes, starting with Quebec and then right to Ontario. I hope we will not see that, but I need to tell you that I fear that. I fear that because it will be the end not only of our profession, but actually of patient care in this province. So as Matt said also, we cannot recruit without retaining. We got to first retain, parallel, retain and recruit, so that when those new graduates or students go to the places of work, they're not hearing about a 30-year-old or a 25 or a 32 that says, oh, I'm gone, I'm leaving in a week. They need to hear from our colleagues, I love it, because nurses love their work. Nurses want to care for people. That's not the issue. The issue is the system, it's not nurses. So with that, I will open for questions for anyone that has questions, first with the media.
Thank you, Doris. So if any members of the media first have questions, if you use the raised hand feature in the participant box, we'll call on you and then make sure your mic gets unmuted. I don't see any hands raised. So if there's any non-media members who are participating today who want to ask a question, please use the raised hand feature. I also want to make sure everybody is aware that the media release summarizing the key findings of the report is posted in the RNAO website newsroom, as well as being sent out to many of our media colleagues. Any questions, comments, feedback from anybody?
I guess we shocked everybody. Well, you know what? If that's what we did, that's good. That's all I can say on behalf of RNAO, because something got to change. This has been going too long, and the pandemic only magnified and made it worse. This is not completely new.
Oh, so Deborah Lefebvre has a question. She says her hand raising isn't working, so we'll let Deb Lefebvre speak.
Hi, thank you, Morgan. Sorry, my hand feature is not working. Thanks so much for all the hard work that's gone into taking a pulse on what we're on nurse professionals in Ontario. Doris, you mentioned the abysmal statistic that Canada, Ontario is the worst when it comes to long-term care. Is it not true as well that we rank, I think, second in the world to the number of acute care beds by the OECD? So I think is that true? Yes.
Yeah, that would not be a problem, Deb, if we had a phenomenal, super strong home care program.
Mm.
Ideally, what you want is to have such a vibrant home care program, and some countries have that, that you don't need the same amount of beds in a hospital. The problem is we don't have it. RNAO has been asking also on that to strengthen significantly home care, to strengthen significantly primary care, right?
Exactly. And so then and I was about to lead into that, with a stronger community health network, stronger primary care, we'd be able to better protect our seniors and anyone that needs that type of healthcare support. Yeah.
Correct, correct. I mean, look what's happening, and that's something not for this for this press conference. And I'm sorry about the colleague that just wrote, we are silent because we are mourning. To tell you the truth, we too. We too. The reality is that the issue of older persons care, the way we are planning it, is more and more and more mega places instead of more and more and more micro places or meso places in the community. This is what ECHO speaks about. And when you couple it with poor staffing, well, you get what we have gotten. Listen, we get what we pay for. We get what we design. The issues that have happened during the pandemic in Ontario are by design. And I have tweeted about that often. And people say to me, what do you mean by design? By design. The fact that we are on a third wave, when we sent a press release about a month ago saying, keep the lock, keep us tight, right? It didn't happen. By design, we have a third wave. Yeah. By policy design, by political decisions design. The fact that we are the lowest RN per population, when in 2013, my friend and colleague Kim Jarvie will remember us sending a letter to then Premier, another Premier, McGuinty, saying don't put the brakes on RN increase, because during Mike Harris we had a decrease. Then Dalton McGuinty put the tap on. Nursing has been tap on, like the water, you know, you turn it off and you turn it on. And in the change between Mike Harris and McGuinty, the tap was on, the profession started to boom. Then they decided it's too much, tap off, and now we are in the mess that we are. Nursing needs to be a stable profession if we want to retain those 21 to 35 that you know very well, and my colleagues that are faculty know very well. They come out of school all pumped up. Look at what's happening now, that on the bright side, so people can live with something warm in the heart. The applications to nursing schools are higher than ever, not only in Ontario, around the world, higher than ever, meaning people want to become a nurse. That's not the question. People want to become the nurse. They graduate from nursing because it is tough schooling and tough clinical practice. They graduate and they stay, they go to work, and then they start to discover that things were not the way they thought. And you have this proportion, as Kim said, usually 4%, 4.5, now is 4 times that amount because of because of a year of stress. Everybody had a year of stress, but those in the front lines, let's not compare it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And Matt spoke about the issues of lack of PPE on the first round, right? All the fear that they had, and they spoke about that in the survey. The fear of catching up the virus. Just, I mean, picture any of us, right?
It is multi-system, and I'm just so grateful that RNAO continues, you know, with their grip on things, and with the surveys and with the statistics. It's just so very frustrating to hear Kim say that this has been going on for nearly a decade, and you just mentioned Doris. And it just seems that those people that make the decisions are not listening, and here we are today in this crisis.
Well, you know what is to me very puzzling as a nurse leader, and very heartbreaking as a human being, is to hear anyone say, this is a broken system. You heard Minister Fullerton, or now we will hear nursing needs help, and we heard the Premier coming, and I believe they mean it, and then say to us, it will take 4 years to fix it. By the time it's 4, I can understand you tell me 2. You cannot do it overnight. But 4, by then all these nurses 21 to 35 that said, we can't wait, we're gone, they will be gone. So then you don't just need to catch up, you need to triple catch up, quadruple catch up. You're never catching up.
Thanks, Doris, and thanks, Deborah, for the question. There's another person with their hand raised. So, Roselle.
Yes, hello?
Hello.
Hi there. Thank you so much to everyone for this wonderful presentation, especially it's definitely something that's been on our minds, and seeing that it's coming into some statistics and some research is amazing. So I'm Rochelle. I'm a master's care nurse currently working in the ICU. And one of my major questions I'd like to ask today is that the statistic that you mentioned on having a lot of senior leadership and as well as people within the college sector retiring poses a big kind of gap in terms of how we're going to pass on those roles. And as someone who's interested in being able to make a difference, how is the RNAO currently empowering those individuals trying to get into those roles? Since I have found that it has been difficult sometimes to advocate your voice based on just being at a staff nurse level. So is there anything that the RNAO is currently doing, or is there anything that we can do going forward to help address that issue?
So the answer number 1 is yes, we have a whole program, the Nurse Executive Leadership Program, and there is even institutes, etc. I need to tell you that that figure was shocking for me. That one was surprising. Not so much the college, but the nurse executives, and to a certain extent, the nurse managers. Because although it's natural because they're more advanced in their career age, that they will retire at some point, I never expected, but I was warned about that. But nonetheless, I didn't expect that such a number, 13%, almost 14% of chief nurse executives said. And I was warned because one of them wrote to me in the first wave and said, just so you know, after the pandemic, I'm going back to some other type of work. No more chief nurse for me. A seasoned person, not a person that didn't have experience. I don't think that we realize overall in the system the pressure that the chief nurses, more than anyone, and the nurse managers have been, of seeing their staff in very difficult situations, hearing their staff that they need more support, right? Hearing their staff that they need more staffing, and being unable to respond for a variety of reasons. And I think we underestimated the impact of that on senior leadership in nursing. But as you say, it will be a huge problem because it's not only about passing it on to other nurses and succession planning, which Matt spoke in the recommendations, right? That's all about succession planning on those three categories. But it's also about the health system. The health system will crumble if chief nurses retire in mass, and the health system will crumble if there is no faculty to teach the new students, or if there is no managers. It will. If not, ask Morgan. She's the director of care in a nursing home. I don't think they could function without.
Hello,
Dr.
may I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
I'm a nursing student in my second year of the Bachelor of Science Nursing program in Georgian College. It's the collaborative program with York University. And I just wanted to bring forward some concerns that we had in regards to the faculty and them requesting that we write our final exams in person. So basically what was going on was in the beginning of the semester, we were told everything was online and this was a guarantee. Therefore, people who did not have an agency clinical stayed wherever they lived. And the people who did have an agency clinical, for example, myself, which I attend clinical in Alliston, we had to move out. And so basically, I live alone because the floor that I have to do my clinical on is a COVID floor. They have some COVID patients on there, as well as regular med-surg patients. The school is now requesting that we write our final exams in person, and they are asking students all around Ontario that are in our program to come to the exam to all sit in a room and write it together. My concern is I work with COVID patients. Some other students work in long-term care homes. Other students are coming from all over Ontario in different hotspots and such. They only gave us 4 weeks notice. And so those of us in clinical, our last day of clinical is a week before the exam. Therefore, we don't have the time to quarantine to make sure that we are safe to attend the exams.
Yeah. So yes, we heard about this. I heard about this yesterday. We are looking into this. Also, Kim heard from a colleague, one of your classmates. And
Yeah.
I am in touch about that, both with York and also with the ministry. This is not only about York. York to understand why they are doing it. And I think I will know the answer. I can tell you the answer I will get.
Exactly.
I know the answer that they will give me because some issues have taken place in some universities. Nonetheless, you don't do that because some issues have taken place, you fix them. But we are also in touch with the ministry because that can have implications in terms of the spread of COVID.
Yeah, and so this is taking place in Georgian College in Barrie. And so my concern is when I am finished my final exams, I have to go move out of my lease and move home with my family, and all of my family members are immunocompromised. And I will be coming from ending a clinical where I have COVID patients on my floor, and then also coming from an exam where I just sat in a room filled with people who came from all over Ontario, people coming in from different provinces to write these final exams. So I don't think that the protocols that they have in place will mitigate the spread of COVID-19.
I totally understand what you're saying. And as I said, we are looking into that, but I also saw within the list of attendees, Sandy DeLuca, that heads CATS, the umbrella organization for colleges. Sandy, it will be great if you speak with Linda Johnson to see from Coupon to see if there is actually more than only this university or this college, that there are some others. We will get back to members through the In the Loop or through my blog. You will hear back about this. And also through, yes. And you know what?
Well, thank you so much.
Put your email also, and PG will take your email also, so we can also respond to you directly if you don't mind.
Okay, would you like my personal email or my school email?
Whatever you prefer. It's up to you. But also what we can do, if you don't want to put the email in the chat, PG, put my email in the chat, please. and then you can write a note to me and PG, and we will keep you informed.
Okay, I can leave my email in the chat. That's no problem. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you. And good luck in whichever way it goes, hopefully from home.
Thank you.
Okay, any other individuals who have questions that they want to ask?
And if not, I have a request, Morgan. I can say it meanwhile that people mark there. I would like to know if any of our colleagues feels free of any pressure or whatever to speak with media. And if you do, whether you want to send your name directly to PG put your email, or if you want to put it on the chat, simply put your name and in which sector you work. That would be really good, because we have a lot of media requests, and it will be great to have you guys raising your voice on issues.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Fariba. I'm not a registered nurse from Canada, but I'm a registered nurse, international registered nurse. And I passed a lot of course in George Brown Centennial College about health science, about the adult, about a lot of things. But unfortunately, because I couldn't take a course, I was in the process of CNO. And the first year I didn't know how to apply, and it takes too much time to apply, to stay in the process, to arrange the document, to do a lot of things. And I think this process, it's affect directly or in our confidence, because I came to Canada with for more, best opportunity for a job. And this time, so I have to work in the other for other company, or it's I think when we come here with a lot of experience, with a lot of confidence, but we cannot work in our professional. I don't say directly to go to my professional, but when we have to stay for 2 or 3 years in line to pass all of the evaluation, we lose our interest, and it affects on everything, confidence of everything. I'm going to know, do you think international nurse from other countries, they don't know more than the nursing, a student nurse or a PSW, to ask them to help in this situation in hospital, long-term care, to help to, as a humanity, to help to other people?
So I will take that question and comment, Morgan, because I too am an internationally educated nurse. So number one, let me tell you, I know exactly what you are going through. I was the first, that is the first public statement I'm making on this, but I was the first nurse in Ontario that challenged actually the college to age break on this. And I have taken upon myself on behalf of RNAO to help international nurses that come with a lot of skill and education, a lot, and wait way too long. And so I understand perfectly. PG knows I have a list of nurses that we have helped. If you still need the support, please send your name to PG, because we will take it on. Of course, you will need to have all the credentials and all the, completions of school. That goes without saying, right? But we will help you walk the path until you become an RN, because you deserve it, number one, and because patients need you, and now even more than ever. And on that, I do need to say that this government and past governments have been very attentive to push this issue. This happens in nursing, this happens in medicine, this happens in other professions, but we can do what we can do for nurses. So please give your name to PG, and I will make sure to speak with you privately a bit more to understand the situation and to help you out.
Thank you so much. I'm really appreciate it, for sure.
There have been quite a few comments in the chat box around the challenge of internationally educated nurses becoming registered in Canada or registered to practice in Ontario.
Yes. Yes. And yeah, and we have letters and emails on that to the college. Those international, you know, PG, we could organize, will be a very interesting meeting actually to organize with our international nurses interest group. Cepelin, I see you are here, to organize with the interest group and with RNAO and with Matt and with a few other people from policy and myself to organize a meeting and discuss it and take the common issues. And then we can also bring the care for nurses that have been very helpful. We work closely with them, and let's take it as an issue, not just an individual member here and there. So PG, I let you organize that on our behalf, but put your names or PG, put your name and they will send you names. They will send you so that people don't feel vulnerable of putting their names on the chat.
Okay, sounds good.
Cepelin, I see you have your hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, two issues. I just want to go back to the nursing issue that we have, that we will have when this COVID is finished, regarding the amount of nurses that wouldn't be in the profession. And fortunately, we have a lot of nurses applying to come into the profession. One of the things that we have to look at, I think, is, and I think we walk around it with a fine tooth comb. The administrators in the hospital and the government should work together, because the issue is, I can do with what I can do with little as much as I can do with, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
So I think the important thing is the administrators have to kind of walk the walk and talk the talk. If you're going to run a hospital, you have to run the hospital being the best version of yourself and making sure the hospital outcome is the best version of the outcome that you're trying to do. And I think that's not happening. Their administrators need to speak to the government, like the top administrators I'm speaking about now, to get together with the government to say, these are the issues that are coming out. And we have to run a hospital. We will have sick people if we have people living in the world. And we have to come to some agreement how we are going to manage these patients in the hospital. And I think the issue is they're just going to piecemeal here, piecemeal there, lay off here, then bring back here, lay off here and bring back here. That doesn't work. And I think we are talking a lot to the converted, and the administrators have to understand that this issue is not going to go away if they don't really step up to the plate, and they're not stepping up to the plate. My other issue is—
Can we touch one first? Can we touch one first? Cepelin, is easier said than done. It's easier said than done. Not all administrators feel empowered or able to push up for a variety of reasons. Not all doctors feel able to push up, and not all nurses, and some, as you know, have ended up being fired and in the newspapers. So it's easier said than done, but that's not to say that we shouldn't push for it or expect that. We called that years ago, let's move with the push-up syndrome instead of the push-down. You know, the staff nurse pushes the manager pushes the chief nurse pushes the CEO, president and CEO, and the CEO pushes government and says more funding. Because the other way, the push down, is everybody pushes down, and at the end, the only ones we push down actually are the patients. And I don't want to tell you where we push them down, as you alluded to. But it's more complicated than that. We have our own colleague, and was pretty much in the media, so I don't need to, even keep the name private. But she was fired, and during the pandemic, a physician, Dr. Brooks, was taken out of his position, and Nathan Stoll was attacked, and David Fishman was attacked, and the list goes on. I mean, we are lucky. I do need to say that we are lucky, and maybe it is because Morgan and I have all of you behind, that nursing core RNAO is not attacked by media or by government or by whoever, quite frankly. But it's not so simple. And maybe that is the reason that you see a large number of chief nurse executives that are saying, I'm hanging till the end of the pandemic because I'm not going to leave nurses and other staff empty-handed, and I'm hanging here till the end of the pandemic because we're not going to leave patients without the care, but after the pandemic, I'm gone. We will learn about that in the focus groups. This is why we will have focus groups, to understand those responses and what are the solutions, and build up a strategy that is push up, not push down, because otherwise we will keep losing people.
Doris, the issue is, as nurses, everyone know that we will stay the course. And that's the issue. We will stay the course, whatever it takes, to make sure that we have the best outcome for our patients, because at some point we will be patients also. So that is a known fact. That has to be recognized, because the amount of apathy that is around has to change. And it's simple. I know it's simple, but somebody has to tackle the simpleness. And we've been speaking about this for a long time, and especially with COVID, we have a lot of older nurses, including myself. We have
but the new generation is not staying the course. This is what Kim was showing you. The new generation basically is very clear to us that if we don't bring the help that they need, they're not going to stay the course.
Okay, my second point is the international nurses. I am an international nurse, and just to speak to the nurse who spoke earlier on, it's one of the things that is important to do, just going through that whole process myself, and I'm sure a lot of us have. Do a lot of research prior to leaving your own home country. Is very important, because usually what happens, the way how nurses practice in one country doesn't match how a nurse practice in another country. So even if you bring your skills with you, sometimes those skills are not applicable in another jurisdiction, because again, some countries nurses practice skills that we are trying to get nurses to do here right now. And when you come with those skills, you feel very disenchanted, if it's a good word to use, because all of a sudden you have all these skills and you can't use them. So you really have to do some research before you come to say, okay, these are the things that I will have to do when I get to my other jurisdiction, because it does take the process. I know that the CNA has, their own process of moving things through. But the biggest thing is to do some research before you leave your own country. The second thing is that once you get to the jurisdiction that you come to, try to find someone to be a good mentor.
Yeah.
Someone very quickly to tell you, what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And again, that has to be a mentor. Another thing that you have to do, if you want to stay within the nursing profession or in the healthcare profession, you may have to do something within the healthcare profession that is not what you had when you came from your other country. But the good thing about that is it keeps you within the health profession. It keeps you connected to how the system works. It keeps you to the sort of Canadian practice. So it really keeps you in. So when it comes time to write the exam, you have already mastered the Canadian system and you know how it works. So the failure rate is not as high as we do have. So if you can kind of think about those things positively, then it will happen. You know, this too shall pass, it will happen. But to lighten the load, these are some of the things that these nurses should do. Thank you.
Absolutely right, Zeppelin. Thank you very much. I would add to that that there are elements that we are looking within RNAO. We are looking at the issue of racism and discrimination against people that come from other countries that are Black, people that come from other countries that are Muslim, people that come from other countries that the English doesn't sound so good, is too Latin American. And I'm involved with at least one or two of each one of those scenarios, and including one that they did the studies in the US in a very well-known faculty. So it'd be beyond me why the person is still not a nurse. The process needs to change. It needs to be faster. And yes, people can start like a PSW, but they should not if they were a nurse in their country. And I'm not diminishing the importance of a PSW. Don't take me wrong, please. PSWs are very important. But if someone was a nurse in a country, in a well-respected university in Philippines or in Chile or in Israel or in Africa, or I don't care where, that is a good university, well-known, they shouldn't go to the hurdles that are going here, and they are for way too long, Sapalin. It needs to be a faster process, no doubt. I want to answer to Amy from the Gritty Nurses. Amy, I wish Amy said we have 80 nurses participating here. We need 80 responses to speaking with the media. Absolutely, yes. I want to give you though, one piece that I was pleasantly surprised actually in the report and was music to my ears. 40% of the respondents said that they did not feel coerced by the employer to speak out. That is good because it used to be much lower, that rate. So if we have the Amy's of the world, and if we have the Brigittes of the world, and the others that are working in the front lines that start to speak out, the genie bottle will become completely open. And the excuse that is because you are, as long as you are not mentioning your employer or your patients, this is a democratic country. We should be able to speak. So thank you, Amy, and keep pushing for that. But Zeppelin, we will do something together with the internationally educated nurses, with the interest group, you guys and us, meaning home office. Because I think we can, it's not to, we need to be only mindful that it's not to duplicate in any way or shape, and PG, we should involve the care for nurses. Is to work together with the care for nurses, but we can facilitate the political process, the pushing process of having the system move faster. I'm not saying they shouldn't check the dots, you know, but sometimes it takes too much to put the dot on the I.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, there's quite a few comments in the chat box.
We will take the chat, and we will, just so people know, and we will also, not for putting out there, but to analyze what else people need or want or are asking, we will do that. Policy will have a close look, and also exec office.
Okay.
Did we say, Matt, were we going to have some polls to put? Did you?
I think after, is Susan McNeil on somewhere? After, I think the press conference and discussions, yeah, I think some polls were prepared for people. Ifra, do you have those? Are you there, Ifra?
I think we do the polls first because they relate to the recommendations, and then we do the rest.
Sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah, advance the slide, Doris, and move into part 2.
Yeah. Very good. So let's do the polls first, right?
Sure, yeah, if you could pull them up, that'd be great.